Dr. T.V. Geeta, Professor, Department of Computer Science, College of Engineering, Guindy, Anna University. Her special interest, Artificial Intelligence and Natural Language. She has published more than 143 articles in national and international journals. She has guided around 7 PhD students. She has got Young Scientist Award from Government of Tamil Nadu in the year 2000, Chief Minister's Special Mention Award in the year 2002 and Woman of Excellence by Rotary Club in the year 2003.
Welcome to the UGC lecture series. In this lecture, we are going to talk about schedules. We had already spoken about schedules. We are going to go in little more in detail about schedules. In this lecture, we are going to discuss the serializability of schedules. We are going to understand conflict and view serializability, which is two types of serializability. Then we are going to explain the conflicts that arise due to interleaved execution, and we are also going to outline the serializability theorem. And we are also going to talk a little bit about the role of system log in this whole concurrency problem. Before we go further, let us first discuss what is meant by recoverable schedules. Now, what is the meaning of a recoverable schedule? If you have a transaction Tj that reads a data item previously written by a transaction Ti, you want a transaction Tj to read a data item that has been written by a transaction Ti, then only after the Ti has been committed, you must commit the operation of Tj. So, that is the meaning of recoverable schedule. Now, let us take an example. The following schedule is not recoverable if T9 commits immediately after the read. Now, if you look here, you have T8 and T9. Now, T9 is reading a data item that has been written by T8. Now, T8 does not commit, but T9 commits, then you do not have a recoverable schedule. Now, that is if T8, why? Because if T8 should abort, T9 would have read and possibly shown to the user an inconsistent database state. Hence, database must ensure that all schedules are recoverable. Next, let us look at something called cascading rollback. Now, a single transaction failure can lead to a series of transaction rollbacks. We have already spoken about what is rollback, that is come back to the previous state in which the database was. Consider the following schedule which is shown next, where none of the transaction has yet been committed. So, the schedule is recoverable. You have T10, T11 and T12. Here you have read A, read B and write A. Here you have a read A and then a write A, and here you have a read A. Now, if this T10 fails, then T11 is not correct, and so T12 is also not correct. So, what we have to do is we have to roll back T11 and T12. So, if T10 fails, T11 which is dependent on T10 and T12 which is dependent on T11, both have to be rolled back. This can be lead to a undoing of a large amount of work. We will talk about what is the meaning about cascadeless schedules. Now, cascading rollbacks cannot occur for each pair of transaction Ti and Tj such that Tj reads a data item previously written by Ti. The commit operation of Ti has to appear before the read operation of Tj, otherwise you will have this problem. So, every cascadeless schedule obviously has to be recoverable also. It is desirable to restrict the schedule so that they are cascadeless. Otherwise, what will happen if you are cascadeless? A lot of data that has been already done by transaction depending on this transaction will have to be rolled back, and lot of work has to be undone. Now, before we go further, let us look at what is meant by a precedence graph. We want to check out whether a schedule is serializable. For this purpose, we use a precedence graph. Now, in this graph, the transactions T1, T2 and so on are the vertices of the graph. The arcs are directional and they are drawn between conflict operation. The schedule will then be serializable. We say a schedule is serializable and hence correct if that precedence graph that we draw has no cycles. So, let us discuss a little more in detail about precedence graph. So, suppose we are talking about a single data item x. Now, if the data item x has been written by Ti and is read by Tj, then after this written by Ti, Tj reads it, then you create an arc between Ti and Tj. If Ti reads and then Tj writes Ti to Tj, if Ti writes and Tj writes, both you create an arc Ti to Tj. This is for a single data item x. So, similarly you can have for other data items also. So, let us look at a serial version of transaction that has a graph. Now, look at this, you have T1, T1 reads x before T2 writes x. So, this is a read x write x combination. So, there has to be an arc from T1 to T2. I will talk about this loss update schedule later, but for the time being let us look at the this as a precedence graph example. T1 reads before T2 writes, T1 reads before T2 writes. So, there is a graph there, and T2 must read x before T1 writes x. So, there is a graph there. This is another example of a schedule where T5 is not dependent on any of these. So, it is they are isolated. Now, if you look at T1, T1 reads a data item and T2 writes. So, T1 to T2 there is one, T1 reads and T3 writes. So, T1 to T3 there is a connection. Then T2 reads and T4 writes. So, T2 to T4 and T3 writes and T4 also writes. So, there is a T3 to T4. So, this is the precedence graph for this set of transactions. Now, given that you have drawn a precedence graph for a set of transactions, okay, then what we do is we say that a schedule is conflict serializable if only if its precedence graph does not contain any cycles or it is acyclic. So, cycle detection algorithms can be done which take the order of n square time, where n is the number of transactions and otherwise number of vertices in the graph, and you can have also better algorithms in the order of n plus e, where e is the number of edges, there is number of conflicts that is present in the precedence graph. Now, if the precedence graph is acyclic, the serializability order can be obtained by a topological ordering of the graph. We know what is the topological ordering of the graph, what comes before and after. This is a linear order of consistent with the partial order of the graph. So, for example, a serializability order for schedule A would be T5, T1, T3, T2, T4. Let us just see T5, T3, T1, T3, T2. So, T5, T3, T1, T2 and so on. So, that is the topological order. So, there can be others also. Now, let us look at this. This is Ti, Tj, Tk, Tm. Now, you can do this as Ti, Tj, Tk and Tm, or you can do this as Ti, Tk, Tj and Tm and so on. But you, unless Ti and Tj finishes, you cannot do Tm, that is the only condition. So, this is a test for conflict serializability. Now, I said that there are two types of serializability, one is conflict serializability and the other is view serializability. Now, the precedence graph test for conflict serializability cannot be used directly to test for view serializability. Extension to test for view serializability has a cost exponential to the size of the precedence graph. So, the problem of checking if a schedule is view serializable is actually not a very simple problem. It falls into the class of NP complete problems. Thus, the existence of an efficient algorithm is extremely unlikely. But however, there are some heuristic algorithms that just check for some sufficient condition, and this has been used for checking view serializability. We will not go into that in detail in this lecture. Now, let us look at what is called a serializability theorem. A schedule of two-phase transactions might not be deadlock free, but if it is, any schedule of two-phase transaction is conflict serializable. This is the theorem that they talk about. It gives us the same result as a serial version of the schedule and hence is correct, that is the idea. Now, a schedule of two-phase transaction is either conflict serializable or results in deadlock. This relationship of relationship that it is either conflict serializable or there is a deadlock is captured by what is called a wait for. One is captured by the wait for graph and the other is captured by the precedence graphs. So, wait for graph, here a cycle indicates deadlock. In a precedence graph, a cycle indicates that the schedule is not conflict serializable. For two-phase transactions, these are the same thing. So, let us look at what is the precedence graph and what is the wait for graph. Precedence graph, each transaction is a vertex in either case, precedence graph also transaction is a vertex, and in the wait for graph also transaction is a vertex. Now, let us look at this. If you want to read draw an arc from the T1 to T2, T1 reads x before T2 writes x, and T1 writes x before T2 reads x, and T1 writes x before T2 writes x. So, these are the 3 combinations. Now, here for wait, I will talk about these locks later. Arcs from T2 to T1, T1 S locks x, then T2 tries to x lock it, T1 x locks x, then T2 tries to s lock it, and if T1 x locks x, then T2 tries to x lock it. Now, the meaning of this is T1, because of this read operation, places a shareable lock on x, then T2 tries to get an exclusive graph lock for it. If T1 has an exclusive lock on x, then T2 tries to get a shareable lock for it. If T1 has an exclusive lock on x, then T2 also tries to get a similar exclusive lock. So, let us take an example of this and see what happens. Now, T1, T2, these are the transactions and the read and write operations. Here you can see the data items. So, T1 reads x, T2 reads y, T1 writes x, T2 reads x. So, here we have a T2 T1 write and T2 read. Then you have a T2 read and a T3 read, T2 read and a T3 read. Now, if you look at y, T2 read y, T2 read y, where is y, and T1 reads y. So, 2 y's, 2 reads. Then if you take z, T3 reads z, that is all. So, let us look at now here if you look, T2 reads x after T1 writes x. So, T1 must go before T2. So, T1 must go before T2 in the precedence graph. Now, here because of this T1 reads y and T1 writes T2 reads y and T1 writes y. So, T2 must go before T1. Okay. So, this is the precedent graph and the wait graph. So, that is all the conditions are. So, T1 reads, T2 writes, T1 writes, T2 reads, T1 writes and T2 writes. So, again let us check, T1 reads, T2 reads, no problem, T1 writes, T2 reads, okay, that is the first one. Y, you have 3 places, T2 reads and T1 writes, then Z, T1 reads and T3 itself writes, so no problem. So, here you have conflicts with respect to 2 data items x and y. Now, 2 actions on the same data object conflict if at least one of them is a write. If both are read, no problem. We will now consider 3 ways in which a schedule involving 2 consistency preserving transaction can leave a consistent database inconsistent. Now, so let us look at this. This is T1. So, T1 reads data item A and writes data item A, and T2 reads that same data item A and writes it, and but T1 actually aborts. Okay. So, at this point what happens, it is reading a wrong value. So, this reading is called a dirty read because you are reading this data before T1's new value has been committed. Now, this is unrepeatable reads called RW, this is called WR, after WR. So, that is called the WR conflicts. Here you have unrepeatable reads which is called as read write conflicts. Here you have a read and this is committed. Now, what happens is here you have a write, okay, and it is committed before the read has been committed. So, what happens if somewhere here there is, so there is no it is an unrepeatable read because this has been committed before this has been. Then this is an overwriting. So, WA commits, but it commits after this has been committed. So, the new data of WA is now available. So, things are more complicated when transactions can abort, that is what we were trying to say. So, this cannot be done until T2 has been committed. So, we go for certain types of locking mechanisms which we will discuss after the break. Welcome back after the break. Before the break we were talking about certain types of operations that resulted in wrong information or inconsistent information because of the abort operation being complicating matters. So, here we talk about something called strict two-phase locking. Now, strict two-phase locking allows only serializable schedules. So, what it says is that each transaction must obtain an S lock before reading and an X lock before writing. S lock is called a shared lock which can be used for reading, and X lock is an exclusive lock which can be used for both reading and writing. All locks here, this is what is why we call it as strict. All locks held by a transaction are released only when the transaction completes. Similarly, if a transaction holds an X lock and on an object, no other transaction can get either an S lock or an X lock on that object. So, this is called a strict two-phase locking, and this will prevent that type of problems that we encountered just we were discussing before the break. Now, we can also have more refined locks. Some updates that seem at first sight to require write lock can be given something weaker. So, it need not necessarily be a complete exclusive lock. So, consider a seat count object in a flights database. There are two transactions that wish to book a flight, get X lock and seat count. Does it matter in what order they decrement the count? They are commutative actions. So, it does not matter as long as both of them decrement, it does not matter. Do they actually need a write lock? They need a write lock because otherwise what will happen, they will assume that the seat is available. If a transaction Ti is aborted, then all actions that it has done must be undone. So, if Tj reads an object last written by Ti, then Tj also has to be aborted. Most systems avoid these type of cascading aborts by releasing locks only at commit time. So, only after it get committed the locks are released, which means if if already there was a lock, then Tj could never have read the object. So, that way it is avoiding. If Ti writes an object, then Tj can only read this after Ti commits. Okay. So, only after it finishes and there is no problem of abortion, the Ti aborting, only then can Tj actually get and read it. In order to undo changes, DBMS maintains a log which records what all is happening and every write operation. So, we will go to next discuss what is meant by a log. The following facts are recorded in the log. Ti writes an object that is recorded and it stores the new and the old value, and Ti commits or aborts whatever happens, it stores a record. So, log records are chained together by what is called a transaction ID. So, you will know that what is the which is the transaction you have to undo. So, log is often duplexed and archived, it is stored in a stable storage. That is very important because otherwise after everything goes off you will not get anything to get back to your original state and the database may remain in an inconsistent state. So, what is the connection of all this that we were talking in this lecture to normalization? So, let us discuss a little bit about that. The more redundancy in a database, the more locking is required for the update transaction. In general, less redundancy allows for greater concurrency and greater transaction throughput. So, denormalized data can often result in faster query response, but normalization leads to better transaction throughput. The fundamental trade-off that normally happens when databases are tuned are indexing data can speed up transaction, but this just proves the point, and index IS actually is redundant data. General rule of the thumb is that index slows down transaction. What is more important in your database, whether you want the query response to be more, that is query response is more when you have denormalized data and redundant data, denormalized data, while normalized data you get transaction throughput. Now, the question is which is more important, the answer is not this or that. What it is that certain cases query response is more important, certain cases the transaction is more important. So, there are certain concurrency control protocols also. So, when you have transaction execution and you want concurrency, most DBMS are multi-user system. So, there is need to ensure that concurrent transactions do not interfere with each other's operations. So, you have what are called as transaction scheduling algorithms. We will discuss that in detail later. Now, let us talk about system log. Remember, DBMS must ensure that we do not lose information because of system crashes. So, we must have a method by which we recover from failure. So, we have to use what is called a log file. So, all permanent changes to data are recorded, and the meaning of this is whatever the changes you can undo the changes. After the crash, search log backwards, search the log backwards until the last commit point, and beyond this point effects of transaction are permanently recorded. So, you either need to redo or undo everything that happens since the last commit point. So, when will you undo? When transaction has been only partially completed, then before the crash, then undo. Now, transaction has been completed, but we are unsure whether the data was written to a disk, then you do redo. Now, the question is, how is the log file used? What we need to do is, we either need to redo or undo everything that has happened since the last commit. We do undo when transaction are only partially completed before the crash. In that case, what we do is we undo whatever has been done so far. And when the transaction has been completed, but we do not know whether the data has actually been written to the disk, then what we do is we redo the operations. The system log is a log or journal, and it keeps track of all transaction operations that affect the values of database items. So, information needed to permit recovery from transaction failures. This is the job of what information is stored in the system log. The log is kept on disk so that it is not affected by any type of failure except some catastrophic failure like cyclone or floods or something like that. So, and it is not that you will store it like that, the log is periodically backed up to an archival storage like tape to guard against such failures. What happens is, a unique transaction ID is generated automatically by the system, and this unique transaction ID is used to identify each transaction. So, what are the type of records that you store in the system log? That is what we are going to see next. Actually 5 types of log records. The first one is start transaction T. So, this is a unique ID given to each and every transaction. So, this statement records the record that transaction T has started execution. Then you have write item T X old value new value. So, this is a write item type of record to do with transaction T, and you are talking about the data item X and what is its old value before the writing happened and what is its new value. Records that transaction T has changed the value of database item X from old value to new value. Similarly, you have a read item T comma X, which records the transaction T has read the value of database item X. Then you have 2 other important records, that is commit T records the transaction T has completed successfully and affirms that its effect has been committed, can be committed, which means essentially recorded permanently to the database, and abort T records the transaction T has actually been aborted. If the system crashes, we can recover to a consistent state by examining the log. So, the log contains the record every write operation that changes the value of some database item, possible to undo the effect of these write operation of a transaction T by tracing backwards through the log and resetting all items changed by a write operation to their old values. Because you have the old value and the new value, you can actually sit and correct everything and take it back to the old value. So, you have by tracing back through the system log, you can do this. We can also, this is the case of undo, we can also redo the effect of write operation of a transaction by tracing forward through the lag and setting all items changed by a write operation of T that did not get done previously because of something to their new values. So, now you will understand that one important aspect of any transaction is the commit point. So, what is this commit point of a transaction? The commit point of a transaction reaches a transaction T reaches its commit point when all its operations that access the database have been executed successfully and all effects of all transaction operations on the database has been recorded in the log. So, beyond the commit point, the transaction is said to be committed and its effect is assumed to be permanently recorded in the database. The action then writes the entry commit comma T into the log. Now, this is rollback of transaction. This is needed for transactions that have a start transaction T there in the log, but the same T there is no commit, there is no log entry like commit T. So, this means you have started an execution, but you have not committed. So, you have to redo the transaction. Transactions that have written the commit entry in the log must also have recorded all their write operations in the log and otherwise they would not have been committed. So, their effect on the database can be redone from the log entries. So, what you are going to do? You are going to take the log entries and redo these operations. Please note that this now for both undo and redo, this log is very important. So, this must be kept in a disk in a permanent storage, and in case of system crash, only those written back to disk are considered in the recovery system, because those in the main memory may be lost. Now, there is something called force writing a log. Now, before a transaction reaches its commit point, any portion of the log that has not been written to disk yet must now be written to disk. So, this process is called force writing the log file before the committing a transaction. So, when you reach a commit point, if you have not written anything into the log, you are forced to write everything into the log. What is the meaning of system failures? A system failure means that all running transaction has been affected, and this may be due to software crashes or power failures. The physical media are normally not damaged. At various times, a DBMS takes a checkpoint. So, all committed transactions are written to disk. So, that is one checkpoint, and a record is made of the transactions that are currently running. This is also done, so that in case of anything we can do. So, you have both, as I already discussed, we have both backwards recovery and forward recovery. So, first we need to undo some transaction. Working backwards through the log, we undo any operation by a transaction on the undo list. This returns the database to a consistent state. Forward dictionary, some transaction need to be redone. Working forwards to the log, we redo any operation by a transaction on the redo list. This brings again the database up to date. When you talk about failures, system failures tend not to be too severe. Only information, since the last checkpoint is affected, this can be recovered from the transaction log. However, media failures, disk crashes and more serious. Data stored to disk is damaged. Transaction log itself may be damaged. Backups are needed to recover this. So, here media failures are much more problematic compared to system failures, because system failures, what happens, everything has been stored in the disk. But if the data where the log is stored and everything is stored, if that is lost, then nothing can be done. So, both the data stored on the disk and the transaction log may have been lost. The recovery management component of database system implements the support for atomicity and durability. So, we have what is called a shadow database scheme. So, all the updates are made on a shadow copy of the database. So, DB pointer is made to point to the updated shadow copy after transaction reaches partial commit, and all updated pages have been flushed to disk. DB pointer always points to the current consistent copy of the database. In case transaction fails, old consistent copy pointed to can be used and the shadow copy can be deleted. So, this is the DB pointer. Before update, this is the old copy. After update, it will point to the new copy. So, the shadow database scheme assumes that only one transaction is active at a time and assumes disks do not fail. In this lecture, we have spoken about the concept of different types of serializability. We have discussed the various types of conflicts that can occur due to interleaved execution, and we have also explained the serializability theorem and discussed the role of system log in the recovery process during the undo and redo operations. So, what I want you to do here is to do some exercises. Here we are going to you have to discuss the three types of conflict operations that can occur, and what is the meaning of a recoverable schedule, and why is it necessary to have a recoverable schedule. How can schedule be tested for serializability? Explain with an example, and what are the different techniques used for testing serializability. So, and then you take three transactions T1, T2 and T3 and two schedules S1 and S2, and I want you to draw the serializability graphs for S1 and S2 and state whether each schedule is serializable or not. If a schedule is serializable, write the equivalent serial schedule. So, if you please do these exercise. Thank you.